I'm asking this because I think as we speak today, 80 years after this process, we're actually witnessing another process of trying to wind down a war. I'm speaking about Ukraine, and we see how difficult it is to actually create a political process where all of the stakeholders who have something to say in the game and who somehow can intervene, even on a low level, in order to ruin a peace agreement, how difficult it is to get everybody on the same page. And I know it's not a good habit to ask a historian to draw parallels to the current, but do you have any thoughts about this? What the Japanese surrender teaches us also about bringing peace back to Europe?
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting question. And it is true, in fact, in both cases, both that and the case of Israel and Hamas, that, the process is long drawn out. And, the military pressure is kept up all the time in the hope that somehow or other you can reach an agreement. And in this case, of course, it would be an agreement on Russian terms or an agreement on Israeli terms and so on. And because, in Ukraine's case, it has the support of much of NATO, that process is much harder. But that's not quite the same, I think, as what happens in the Second World War. I think that the point you make is that we can see the Japanese example, and now we can see the example of Ukraine as two different narratives about how difficult it is to bring a conflict to an end. In the case of Russia and Ukraine, you could have a rational argument about how it ought to end, but I think there's no certainty in the end about how it will end. And the same is true of the war in Gaza. Even the historians who've spent all their lives working on the war, as I have, you hesitate to predict what's going to happen in the next year.
Yeah, because each case is different, but the underlying sociological mechanisms of having pro-war and pro-peace factions, having people who argue that it is better to give up and work with what we can get, and the others who say like no, we continue. And in the Japanese case, I mean, the
Yeah,
militarists
yes,
said
yes,
100 million martyrs. That was their
yeah,
motto
yes,
because Japan only had
yeah,
60 million, but they included the 40 million
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah,
Korea. They wanted to,
yes,
they wanted to guerrilla warfare. They said like, let them come
yeah,
and then we'll fight them in the bushes. And that would of
yes,
course have been an incredible bloodletting. And it is a huge success of the peace faction to win over them and say like, shut up, guys, just shut up, and we're
yes,
going to give up. We are not going to
yes.
sacrifice 100 million people.
Yeah, so that was propaganda. I mean, I think that the war minister too actually really understood, in fact, the nature of the problem. By the summer of 1945, Japan was running out of weapons, running out of munitions, running out of, of explosives. It had already run out of ships. It was running out of aircraft. What could you do? And I think that had the Americans had to invade, I think the battle would have been much less disastrous than the predictions suggested at the time. Japan would have been defeated and Honshu and Kyushu occupied. But that's we don't know. That's a what if. I mean, in the case of Ukraine, yes. I mean, the peace party, war party. It's. I mean, they're committed to trying to retain their sovereignty and to reject the fruits of Russian aggression for Putin with strong backing, but perhaps not strong enough. Will there come a point where a majority in the political and military elite say enough is enough? I thought that might come last year. In fact, it didn't. Enough is enough. Our losses are too high. We have no prospect of expelling Russia from the territories that Russia has occupied, so we have to try and live with reality. That may still happen this year, but for an historian, we know so little about what's actually going on in the corridors of power in Kiev or in Moscow. There are lots of very good suppositions and suggestions, but we're going to have to wait 100 years until these archives are open and we can really understand that process.
And then if we And that's the frustrating thing. Like we have to wait for a long time until we get it
Yeah,
right. But we have
yeah.
at least we have the benefit of actually understanding the Second World War and understanding the process of surrender in Japan correctly.